When I tell people that I'm a rare book curator, I'm pretty sure they're envisioning one thing, and that is white cotton gloves. But that's actually an outdated stereotype of how we work with most of our special collections. I started at Houghton in 2004, and we were already phasing these out of use, but I saved a pair as a souvenir. Actually, for most things that you would use at Houghton Library, we don't wear any gloves at all, and certainly not white cotton gloves, which tend to make your fingertips less sensitive to the things that you're handling and make it harder for you to handle them carefully. They also tend to pick up dirt from one item and transfer it to another one. So these days we don't use these anymore. And this book is an example of a kind of thing that it's best to handle with clean, bare hands. When we did a renovation in 2021, we installed a hand washing sink just outside the reading room so that we can be sure people are always coming into the reading room with clean hands. And in most cases, the oil that's in your skin won't do damage to materials in the library. And I picked this particular book as an example because you can see that it's got its original, what we call decal edges. That's a fuzzy edge that's characteristic of handmade paper in this time period. I think you would find it extremely difficult with gloves on to carefully reach in between these irregular page edges to be able to turn to a new page. I think if you had gloves on, you'd sort of be clawing at that edge and maybe doing damage in the process of turning it, which is exactly what we want to avoid. So for most books that are printed on paper or written on parchment, as I said, you want to just use clean, dry hands. But there are some kinds of material where the oil on your skin can do damage. And an example of that is a metal binding like this one. I brought this really beautiful 17th century Armenian manuscript that's in this extremely striking metal binding and embedded with semi-precious stones. So this is an example where we wear nitrile gloves that fit closely to the hand so that you still have good dexterity with your fingertips, but you're not making direct contact with the metal as you open the book. So there are some other rules about when you do or don't wear gloves to handle our materials, and my colleagues are going to show you some examples of those.
I have here a South Asian scroll on paper from the late 19th century, rather delicate. I would not use gloves to handle this item because I'm afraid that a glove might actually abrade the surface more than my hands, which are clean and dry. I would simply very delicately unroll this, keeping to the sides as much as possible, and get as much of the text as I want to work with and secure it like that. This item is a Quran housed in a silver octagonal case. I would use gloves to handle the case, also the cords, which have metal threads as well as textile. I would use gloves to handle all the housing in order to protect the metal from oil and dirt on my hands. Now, once I removed the manuscript from the metal housing, I would just move the case out of the way and continue to work with the text without gloves.
So when handling photographs, we do generally wear gloves. The oils on our hands can damage the chemical properties of the photograph itself.
Okay, so for example, we have this single item of a photograph of Beatrix Potter as a child, and so there is no enclosure here, and so we do want to wear gloves if we were to serve this in the reading room or handle it as we are cataloging it. and also try to be around the edges and not directly on the emulsion of the photograph itself. In this case, this photograph is in a Mylar sleeve, and so we can pick it up with our bare hands as it has this protective enclosure.
Similarly, with glass negatives and any negative, we do want to wear gloves as well. So anytime that we're going to be handling something and possibly touching the surface itself, then we want to have gloves on.
So this here is a light box, and we use that to view any type of negative, and in this case we have our glass negative here. And so, as with other things, these are very fragile, very delicate, and so we do want to have the gloves because it was made with a chemical process, and you can see that there has been some chemical reaction on the corner there that has become damaged over time. And so we just want to be extra careful with these and make sure we don't get any fingerprints, because any fingerprints that go on this negative will now be on any picture that has been reproduced with it. And so sometimes we can find photographers' fingerprints on them, but we don't want our readers or my own fingerprints on them.
Not all materials are quite as straightforward though. In these boxes, I have two different objects, both of which are mostly made from wood, but have some special details that make them a little bit different when you come to actually handling them. So here we have the hornbook, and this hornbook is made out of wood mostly, but does have pieces of metal and some leather on it, meaning it's sort of a strange thing to work with in general, and we have to be really careful with it, because as you can see, all around the edges, there's already some damage and some breakage. So we want to be really careful when handling this one. So we're going to wear our gloves, and it's good we can actually handle this though, because in addition to the front being very interesting, when we turn it over, we can see this design on the back of presumably a king on a horse. And this is in the leather itself that's on the back of the hornbook, and you can even see the little writing there. So you can imagine a little kid holding this while they're learning how to read. Putting this back though, you'll notice the horn itself is missing from the hornbook. It should be over this top, covering it while remaining see-through. However, in this particular case, the horn has separated, so we keep it in a different protective casing. Here, the horn is very carefully stored in tissue paper. So going into it, we want to make sure that we pay extra attention to being careful here. And when we open it, we can see there's already a little bit that has started to break off. So in this case, we're just going to look at it from right here and not risk any more damage to it. Here we have one of the most exciting items, in my opinion, in the collection, which is a wooden pagoda that holds a scroll printed in Japan in 770 AD, and is, as far as we know, the earliest printed text in our collection. So even though this is wood, like the hornbook, in this case we're actually not going to wear gloves. One could certainly argue that gloves would make sense here, and different conservators and curators would probably have different opinions, but in this case, we've decided that it's actually safer to not wear gloves because the wood itself is fairly resistant to potential dangers, and because if you look at this top piece here, you can see there's a little bit broken off. And so since it's so delicate, we want to be extra careful and have all of that tactile hypersensitivity going in so we can really make sure we're safe with it. So if you look at this, you can see that there's some paint that still remains. It was originally painted white, but of course it's worn off with time. And now we're going to put it on some foam to make sure that we keep it safe while it's out. And then, if you were looking at this, you have to be very careful because this top piece just balances. And inside this hole is where the scroll would have gone. While we do still have the scroll that came with this, and it's stored in here, it's particularly delicate, and scrolls take a lot of work to handle, so we're going to leave it in here for now.